What kids' TV show would you be watching at the fall of society?
Probably most likely cartoon Ghostbusters. What was yours?
I was thinking maybe like Rocko's Modern Life.
Well, I feel like I was older watching Rocko's Modern Life. But like when I was like a young kid, it was My Little Ponies. There was a really creepy My Little Ponies cartoon with ooze. And I think I remember it being a bit pervy. There was also one with Raggedy Ann. Some pervy old dude was taking Babette and Raggedy Ann was trying to save her.
Why are they all pervy?
Because it was the 80s and like kids' cartoons were pervy. I also used to watch Unico.
Ooh, Unico.
I loved Unico.
I never watched Unico.
You never watched Unico?
Is it about unicorns?
It's a little unicorn named Unico. And Unico went on all these adventures. And Unico encountered like a really angry, snotty blue devil and a cute little black and white kitty. But then when my mom heard the devil talking, she didn't like that the devil was rude. This little blue devil kid.
So you were banned from Unico?
I was banned from Unico, but I loved Unico so much.
I was a big time Eureka's Castle guy.
Okay. All right. I didn't watch that one. Well, Unico and Eureka's Castle. I think those are good because they're both like you can retreat into like the fantasy world of it as the world is crumbling around you in reality. Hello and welcome to Gutted. I'm Aleece.
And I'm Tony, and we're here to spill our guts about horror films.
Today's episode is a fresh post-gut review for the horror movie 28 Years Later.
Try to think of something different. Oh, my God, me from going lunatic. Falling up and down again. That's all the charge in the world.
Released on June 20th of this year, 2025, directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland. The Dream Team is back.
The Dream Team. And it is starring young Alfie Williams as our central lead character Spike. Also Aaron Taylor Johnson as Jamie, Jodie Comer as Isla, and Ralph Fiennes as Dr. Kelson.
We will review our initial thoughts and predictions made during our June pre-gut episode.
We'll start with some spoiler-free reactions since we've just seen the movie. We actually watched it twice this past couple of days. And then a semi-spoilery synopsis. We're just going to summarize the first third of the movie. And then past the synopsis, we will get into a spoiler full review of the full film.
So you'll have plenty of opportunities to pause and run out to the theater, go watch this incredible movie.
Then come back and listen. And then you can come back in time for our award ceremony.
Our coveted
golden
award guts
ceremony.
We've now seen this movie twice. Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it?
We did see it twice. We saw it opening night. We did not get to see the fan screening, though, at like 7 p.m. We had to go a few hours later because the fan screening was sold out. But when we got there, we're like, oh, there are still posters left from the fan screening. So I asked the employee at AMC and I was like, hey, I see you have extra posters. Can I have one of those posters? And they're like, no, that was for the fan screening. And I was like, but you have extra. What are you going to do with the extras? She's like, I don't know, put them in the dumpster. And I was like, what? Well, help me save the environment. Can I take a couple posters? She's like, no, that's not allowed. We might use them for something else. And I'm like, what else are you going to use them for? And as I'm like mildly arguing with this poor employee at the AMC, her coworker sneaks behind me, grabs the whole bundle and throws them into the elevator, probably going straight to the dumpster. So tisk tisk.
I love that this episode is starting out with a complaint because we didn't get our poster. Okay, but what do you think of the movie?
I'm pissed at the movie.
She's pissed. All she wants to talk about is how she didn't get her poster.
I didn't get my free merch.
Don't they know that we are always on the hunt for merch, creative or just basic?
We have a special segment about merch in most of our trailer reviews. And so the fact that there was merch available, but I couldn't have it because the dumpster wanted it first.
Well, I believe in the earlier episode, you asked for like a ring or something like that. You didn't ask for a poster.
I want a buy biohazard skull ring.
That's right. So they didn't have any of those available.
So I would have taken the poster and then fashioned it into a paper ring. Anyway, the movie itself, I enjoyed it. While watching the movie, I was watching it perhaps too critically, thinking, do I like this? Do I like this? Once it was over, I was like, okay, I think I like that. I had to watch it a second time. The second time viewing it, I was like, I like this. And I was able to relax since I already knew what was going to happen, relax into the world, relax into the movie. I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with movies that have this sort of incredible anticipation. You're like constantly deciding, is this living up to the hype, the buildup that you have? Like you want this to be a good movie. I found myself thinking in this sort of way when we were watching the Halloween reboot, the David Gordon Greens, like almost all of them was like, I feel like I want to like this. I don't know if I like this. And then afterwards, like you're saying, you come out of the theater and you kind of think about it. Did I like it? For this movie, for 28 years later, for me, when I was watching it, I was just like fully loving every second of it. And I came out of the theater, I was like, I fucking loved that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
The first viewing.
The first viewing, yeah.
Okay.
But of course, then you start to question, like, am I just sort of like buzzing off of the excitement of, you know, this is one of our favorite horror movie franchises ever, and 28 Days Later is on our top 10 horror list. So
Both
if you
of our top
want to
10.
go back and watch our first episode when we were lowly podcasters with a dream.
Lowly podcasters 4 years ago. However, I will say, spoiler alert, we are episodes, mere handful of episodes away from our 100th episode. We might revise that list, but I have a feeling it would still be on our lists.
That movie is just incredible. It sort of changed the genre. It kind of brought horror back in a way. So many different accolades you could give 28 Days Later. Did this movie do all of that in terms of the genre? No, I don't think so. But was it just an outstandingly crafted and acted and a great cinematic experience? Did you leave the cinema feeling good? Yes, all of that for me.
The first one, 28 Days Later, I would say that it did successfully reinvent the genre, the quote unquote zombie subgenre of horror. Whether you want to call them zombies or infected or whatever, it's still in that same subgenre. It did reinvent it at that time. We had crazy fast infected people. It was frightening. It was moving. 28 years later, it didn't reinvent the genre, the subgenre again. That would be a tall order. It did stay true to 28 Days Later. Whether it stayed true in that line of 28 days to 28 weeks to 28 years, I don't know. But if you're looking at just 28 days later and then 28 years later, I would still say that they exist within that same world.
A lot of the complaints that I've seen online, and I think we'll get into this a little bit more later, but it's just that this movie kind of ignores 28 weeks later, or sort of what they were setting up at the end of 28 weeks later.
28 weeks later could still have happened. It still could have existed. So much time has transpired between weeks and years that who's to say that that didn't happen? And then somehow along the way, we still end up here where we ended up at 28 years later.
What are some of the things that you enjoyed about 28 years later? What did you think of the cinematography?
Cinematography was fantastic and jarring. It checked a lot of my technical boxes. Cinematography, yes. The score, yes. Acting, yes. The overall tone of the movie, I would say yes. And I feel like the tone for me is a big piece where it did evoke an emotion that was consistent throughout the movie.
When Danny Boyle's at his best, I think he's really good at evoking emotions that are not forced. If there's a scene that of intense suspense, the music doesn't necessarily have to be something that is intensely suspenseful.
Exactly.
And the editing, you have kind of a mixture of inserts of infrared view thing of the infected. You had some stock footage, his like signature like fast cuts or like extremely zoomed in cuts of people running. Just kind of felt nice.
It was nice. It was lovely. It was a lovely zombie/infected film. Without getting into the horror comedy realm, I think I've heard people call it a coming of age horror movie. It is like a little coming of age horror movie. And it kind of just leaves you feeling good at the end.
Yeah. And speaking of coming of age, we have the introduction to Alfie Williams, and he did a really great job portraying young Spike.
Young Spike.
12-year-old Spike.
So I don't think this is quite an allusion to 28 Weeks Later, but our young boy in that movie was also 12 years old, trying to figure out his way in this post-apocalyptic world. Probably not connected.
There still could be some connections, because that's the other thing, is that 28 Years Later is one part of a trilogy. So it's sort of like a reboot times 3.
When you heard that it was a trilogy, this final chapter of years, when you heard it was a trilogy, how did you feel about that?
Quite early on in the production, just in social media, I had seen rumblings that it was a trilogy. So I kind of knew the way that the movie set up. I was like, okay, it's probably going to end on a cliffhanger. So that kind of like prepared me to not be disappointed by a cliffhanger type ending.
I did not know it was going to be a trilogy until I looked at my ticket in my AMC app and I was like, what? This is part 1?
Spoiled by the AMC app.
I was spoiled by the AMC app, and I was kind of annoyed hearing that it was part 1. I didn't know it was a trilogy. I thought maybe it was like 1 of 2. And I was like, Tony, did you know this is part 1 of something? And Tony's like, yeah, it's part 1 of a trilogy. And I was like,
Of course I was going to tell you if you didn't know.
I like rolled my eyes because I was just like, come on. So now I'm going to like not have the full story, the full cathartic moment of this movie, this trajectory that I already felt was going to be part 3 of something. Like we had days, then weeks, then years. And now I hear that it's going to be part 1 of 3 of the third piece.
But, you know, maybe that tells us that Alex Garland has quite the story to tell.
Going into this movie without having seen it, I thought, is this one of those cash grab moments where Alex Garland and Danny Boyle are pairing up and they're like, let's get some money from this franchise and really draw it out. And so that's why I was not looking forward to it being part 1 of 3. It felt like almost like the whole Exorcist Believer trilogy that was going to happen, or perhaps still might. And it felt like forced. So I was immediately setting myself up to not like it.
So I was the opposite. I just thought that like, okay, Alex Garland and Danny Boyle have more to lose from this movie than to gain, because they basically they've created 28 Days Later, which horror fans, I think, almost universally love. And like, why would they risk ruining this franchise? But yeah, I guess cash would be a good motivator for that, like you're saying. But I don't know. I didn't have that feeling when coming into it that it was going to be a cash grab. I thought like it was just always going to happen just because the movie is called 28 Days Later. So it's like 28 years later. We didn't get 28 months later, but 28 years later seems like a logical next step. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like we were waiting for this to happen for a very long time.
And then maybe we'll eventually get 28 decades later and they all go to space.
I am looking forward to the AI creation of 28 decades later
in space,
when we are all living in the cloud and we are all just AI renditions of ourselves.
And then there's
as well.
A computer virus that infects the AI cloud.
Okay, before we get into predictions for a movie that doesn't exist, let's go ahead and talk about this movie, 28 Years Later. For the next portion of this episode, we are going to give some semi-spoilers.
This synopsis is really just summarizing the first third of the movie. So if you don't care about the first third of the movie being spoiled, then listen away.
Okay. A group of frightened children are huddled into a room with the calming presence of Dipsy, Lala, Tinky Winky, and Poe to distract them from the chaos of the rage virus just outside their doors. Their parents, nervous and panicked, are desperate to protect their children, but the infected still get through, attacking the household, snarling and ripping through everyone in their way. One little boy, Jimmy, manages to escape, running to a nearby church where his priest/father has embraced the event as Judgment Day. The horde crashes through the stained glass as the maniacal priest all too happily accepts his fate. Clutching the large cross necklace that his father had just bestowed upon him, Jimmy hides, witnessing the destruction of the infected. Cut to 28 years later. The rage virus has been eradicated from mainland Europe. The British Isles are under strict quarantine, leaving anyone left behind completely and utterly isolated. Here, we are introduced to a village that resides on a small island just off the mainland. It is connected by a causeway that can only be accessed during low tide. These villagers or survivors live and thrive as good as the situation allows. Today, however, is a special day for 12-year-old Spike, who is heading out to the mainland for the first time with his father, Jamie, as a rite of passage to kill a few of the infected. The townspeople cheer for the young boy's journey. However, Mom, Isla, who is sick and bedridden, is furious that Dad would take her son at such a young age. Fortunately for Mom, she soon forgets the reason for her anger and is appeased by her doting son's white lie that he's just going to school. While on their mission, Jamie teaches Spike and the audience about how the infected have evolved, the dangers of the mainland, and how those who are left are completely on their own. After an eventful day and night of bagging some infected kills, finding an ominous Jimmy carving, and narrowly escaping an alpha, the two finally make it home to a rip-roaring party, Jamie's mistress, more secrets, and Mom's worsening condition. The next morning, Spike decides it's time to grow up. After pulling a knife on his philandering dad, he makes the adult decision to take his ailing mom back across the causeway in search of a cure from a mysterious orange doctor. What he finds on this wild and vast mainland is more than he could have ever imagined. For there are more things in heaven and earth, young Spike, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Is that a little Hamlet quote that you snuck in at the end there?
I snuck in a little Hamlet quote at the very end.
All right. So yeah, that's the setup. We have the story of this village, and more specifically, the story of this young boy, Spike, in this post 28 days and 28 weeks later world.
Mm-hmm. Kind of alluding back to one of our predictions during the pre-gut trailer review. I thought that they were going to the mainland to get supplies, but it really is just a rite of passage. Dad is taking his son when he's 12, and even the others in the community are like, oh, he's a bit too young for this rite of passage.
Yeah.
And Dad's like gung-ho. He's like, no, we can do this. He's old enough. So they're not going to get supplies. They do find a Frisbee, which is cool. But they're really just going so Spike can get his feet wet in killing the infected. When he's older, he will have to go find supplies. But for now, it's just to kill a few of the infected and get back before high tide.
They can really only access the mainland during low tide, so they have a pretty limited window.
Going back to our young Jimmy, this is not Spike. This is not anybody else who we've seen up to this point. We just see him in the beginning, this little blonde boy named Jimmy and his 8 sisters and parents, and he flees the horde. This opening reminds me more of a 28 weeks later opening than it does a 28 days later opening.
Oh, why is that?
Because in the 28 weeks later opening, we do have this small little group of survivors. Our small little survivor community is in this house. It's dark. It's dank. They have boarded up all the windows. And then a little boy does come to them, and they're forced to open up their door to this little boy while a horde is coming at them. Chaos ensues in 28 weeks later in the opening. We get that In the House Within a Heartbeat, sung by John Murphy and Robert Carlyle running. Great opening. This opening with Jimmy, it's less ominous just because of the score. We have the score done by Young Fathers, or an artist called Young Fathers, and it's a very almost hopeful, energetic song that is set to the backdrop of Jimmy running past a horde or beyond a horde and to his priest father. I couldn't quite tell if that was actually his dad or he's just saying like dad, as in like a father kind of way.
I think that's his dad.
You think that's his dad?
I don't think you don't go around calling people dad if they're not your dad.
Well, you call a priest father. So he's just, colloquializing it.
I was setting you up to say, unless you're Jodie Comer.
Unless you're Jodie Comer. We haven't gotten to that part yet.
Oh, yeah. Okay, then never mind.
But it did have more of a 28 weeks later vibe than a 28 days later vibe.
Just frightening, just seeing another situation where it's like, what do you do with all the kids who are in this world? Like the parents are just huddling them into a room, just be like, okay, just sit here, watch Teletubbies and everything's going to be okay.
And there was a little girl, a blonde girl in a blue sweater who was doing a great job looking like she was trying to not think about the chaos outside. She was crying. She was covering her face. All the other kids look kind of oblivious. But I was looking at that one little girl with the blue sweater. Good job, unknown little sister. We don't see again. She probably gets eaten.
You just see blood splattering across the TV screen and chaos ensues.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't know who survived out of that whole ordeal.
Yeah, it seems like all the sisters get eaten. And then Jimmy, because he's behind the door, he actually gets away. Even though this looked visually similar to the tone of 28 Weeks Later, it felt very different than 28 Weeks Later. It felt more hopeful. And I would guess that people who are fans of 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later, this opening probably fell short for them. You're crossing your fingers for that John Murphy song, and you get almost the complete opposite of that song. It's not ominous or terrifying. It's hopeful.
Ominously hopeful. You're talking about Promised Land by Young Fathers. It kind of has like a kind of feel to it.
Yeah, like a chanting feel, almost like a church-like feel.
It's hard to like put your finger on it. It feels just sort of off. I don't have a better word for it than it feels off.
It feels off because that song does not feel like it matches the scene. After seeing it a second time, I was like, okay, I'm down with this. I'm okay with this jarring mixture of hopeful communal song and chanting with the chaos of what we're actually seeing on screen. But watching it for the first time, it's not what I wanted.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wanted that John Murphy song. I think a lot of people might have felt the same. People who did not like the film overall, that's what you're given to digest in the very beginning. And so I would venture to guess that after that, you lost a bunch of the audience.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see like going into the theater watching this movie and you're just waiting for that song because it's such an iconic part of this franchise.
Yeah, it's what 28 Days ended on. It's what 28 Weeks Later begins on.
It's one of our top songs in horror. You can rewatch that episode.
Yeah, top scene songs. And so because we didn't get that in the beginning, we got something that felt like the complete opposite. I would guess that people that didn't like this movie, it's because that's what they were given as the intro. And they probably weren't sold on that. Therefore, they weren't going to be sold on the rest.
The maniacal priest, he's like screaming like, yes, my children, yes. That seemed
melodramatic.
Melodramatic, that's a good word. That reminds me of 28 Days. It did kind of allude back to that first film.
To the church. Because when Jim is walking around the town, when he's walking around the city, he does walk into a church.
Yeah.
Interesting choices for the opening. I don't know if I entirely was sold on them. Any moments that stood out for you in that first third when he goes with his dad, Jamie, for his rite of passage?
Right after we cut to 28 Days Later, you have that other kind of like wistful song and they're just making breakfast and walking through the town.
Just living about town, living their lives.
I was like, all right, yeah, I'm kind of into this. Jamie, he's waking up and his dad's making him breakfast.
He gets bacon. It's a special day.
Treat as they move across the causeway, and you can tell it's like, okay, this is the scene where the dad is telling the boy, but the boy is really also us, the audience.
Yeah.
So we're also learning about like how the infected have evolved in 28 years. There's some slow ones, and now there's these alphas, these like scary ones.
I did think that was interesting when we first see the what were they calling them? The slowies?
I don't know what they were called, but they crawl on the ground and they're extremely large and bloated and they're eating worms.
They're just crawling along, chomping on worms. But it feels like the infected have also gravitated towards communities of their own. The fast ones that are still running, they will hunt together in packs almost.
Yeah.
And the ones that are slow, they seem like that they crawl in packs or family units.
So we're definitely seeing the evolution of the infected people. And we also get the status of the world as well. It's like there are boats that are patrolling the seas
from other countries to make sure that people on this mainland, this infected mainland, don't try to escape, which seems heartless, but it does make sense in this evolved society. It's like, okay, they know from experience letting people back onto other countries or set foot away from this mainland is bad news.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, sorry, you're out of luck if you're stuck on this mainland.
And the rest of the world moves on. We get that last scene in 28 Weeks of the infected running towards the Eiffel Tower.
They get to Paris.
But we don't know what happens after that. In 28 Days Later, there was a brief moment where Selena is saying that there are reports of infected in Paris and New York.
I gathered at the end of 28 Days Later is that that was misinformation. The infection did not spread beyond England.
I did listen to an interview with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. They just kind of attributed it to like, yeah, it was contained and pushed back to the mainland. You can assume that maybe Paris was nuked And maybe another, one of my favorite predictions, the town gets nuked.
Yeah. So Paris was nuked and then they pushed it back to just the UK.
Aleece, what were some of your favorite scenes from this movie?
I did really love when they get across the causeway. It starts innocently enough. Spike's never seen so much land. He kills one of the slow crawly zombies. They come across a house that has a hanging infected person with a bag over its head. Down the chest of the hanging infected person, it says Jimmy. It's been carved into this body. Is this Jimmy from the beginning and he's been carved up now? Or did Jimmy do it? But I like when they get outside of that little house and they see a group of fast zombies appearing over the hill. It's a really great distance shot, broad daylight. There's one tree and then 8 fast infected come up on the hill, just on the horizon. And then there's one that's very distinct. And this one stands out because it's not flailing. It's not moving very much. It's just looking right at us. And then he almost signals the rest of the infected to go and charge. And that one alpha that we learn just stands there and watches it happen. The score that happens is very intense. It's edited very well. Aaron Taylor Johnson's performance is fantastic. I love the moment when he gets up to the second story of this little shack and he's trying to get his son pushed into the attic. He kneels down and has Spike stand on his knee and tries to push it up while he's also wielding a bow and arrow, trying to shoot infected. Well edited, well acted, and well scored. That's a great scene.
They're doing all this. They're shooting crossbows. There's no more guns in this world. So that makes it extra challenging, like extra skilled.
Yeah. And they don't retrieve these arrows either. I'm guessing because they've been, laid in an infected blood. So you don't want to touch it. Once you use the arrow on the infected, you can't get that one back.
Yeah. It's not some like Daryl Dixon thing where you go with one crossbow in a dream.
So we just talked about the scene where Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, Jamie, is a badass. Meanwhile, the alpha that's not moving is still standing on the horizon. The alpha has not come forward yet. Alpha's just waiting. And I found that part very creepy. The tide becomes low enough to where maybe they can get across. Their house that they are seeking refuge in collapses. Jamie's like, okay, we need to go now for the causeway. Even though it's not low tide, it's low enough. It's at shin level. We can make it. The sky is lit up with stars, and the score during this moment, I think it's called The Causeway by Young Fathers. It's very hopeful and invigorating, something that you might see at the climax of an adventure movie. Feels like Spike on an adventure with his dad. It doesn't feel like a horror movie in this scene.
But at the same time, extremely suspenseful because they're booking it and they think that they're safe from danger. They're like halfway across the causeway. They hear just a very faint splashing of the feet running.
But you don't see the alpha. And that's what's so creepy about this scene is that they are splashing through the causeway because the water is still at shin level. And looking from above, you can see their splashes in the causeway. And then we see a smaller splash behind them and it's almost glowing. It's illuminated by the moonlight. You can't see the alpha. You just see the illuminated splashes behind them getting closer. And it's so suspenseful, even though we have this very climactic, adventurous song behind them. It's so scary. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is where Jamie dies. Like Jamie, the dad, is going to die. I know it. Trying to get his son back to the village. They're like, alpha behind us. And he's whistling manically. His community in the tower, they are able to shoot flaming arrows, but that doesn't slow the alpha down. And he's just inches away from Jamie and Spike. And Jamie actually says at one point, "This is it, Spike." And I was like wondering, does he mean this is it? We have to duck again so the arrows can go through the alpha a second time, or this is it, we're going to die. Brace yourself. Of course, the arrows go through the alpha. Alpha's dead and they make it.
And then they get to the party.
Yeah.
That scene definitely encompasses a lot of the things that work about this movie. So you mentioned the soundtrack, unexpected, hopeful feeling, but also at the same time, the action being very suspenseful and very tense and very creepy.
The choice to use that song, The Causeway, with that scene felt confusing, but it also kind of made me feel like, okay, they can't die. The music's telling me that this is an adventure and just another part of their adventure, and that it's not really a risk, even though it does look extremely risky.
For me, definitely the soundtrack is something that stands out. I think this Young Father soundtrack, we found ourselves listening to this just kind of like
several times.
Yeah, several times already, just playing it in the house as we're going about our day.
And it really propels you back to the scenes that happened.
The soundtrack in itself tells a story. It's not just sort of like a collection of different songs, because in the first movie, there was some pop songs that were thrown in. We had the Granddaddy song and a little bit of a score. But this one is just all this sort of hybrid of like it kind of sounds like a song that maybe has existed, but it's also a score. Bravo to Young Fathers.
Yeah.
Another thing, the way that the suspense is cut is jarring and suspenseful and breathtaking.
Yeah.
Then you have a few scenes where the world kind of widens, like in that scene where they're running across the causeway. It's at night and you see the northern lights in the background and the night sky. It almost looks like
magical.
like
ethereal.
like you're saying an adventure. So yeah, it definitely has this sort of like larger than life feel to how they shot the movie.
Yeah.
You mentioned the alpha. What about, shall we mention the elephant in the room?
The top dong.
The elephant sized trunk in the room.
Yeah. If you're alpha, then you have to have a giant dong. Apparently, that was a requirement for our main alpha.
Oh, man.
I don't remember the dong on the first alpha that we encountered. He died pretty quickly. But the second one that steps up, he definitely steps up.
So the infected people on the mainland 28 years later, most of them are just they kind of look like
Animalistic?
Very animalistic. They're dirty, they have long hair,
but they are sculpted.
Are rugged. Well, some of them are sculpted. Actually, that's why I appreciated that there were a variety of different infected body types.
Just like in society.
Yeah. You had the really super emaciated ones, like the one that we all thought was Cillian Murphy, like popping up in the flower
in the tall
bushes.
weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have the larger ones who just kind of crawl on the ground and eat worms. And sometimes they'll eat a shoelace and they'll think it's a worm.
And then you have the fit active ones, but then even amongst the fit active ones, you have your alpha. I don't think there are any alphas amongst the crawling ones.
The alphas kind of are in charge of the fast moving.
If you can
infected.
run, then you have an alpha leader.
Well, how are you going to be able to run with that thing swinging like it does?
He had no problem. He charged full force, didn't seem to get in his way.
It was almost like startling because in the first few scenes where they were showing the alpha, he was like from afar, right? So you can't really see what's going on. And then you see a few other scenes and you see like there's definitely some genitalia there.
This pendulous thing coming at you, larger than life. That would be frightening. Maybe it's almost like a hypnosis or like a hypnotic tactic. Like you're not going to move. You're going to be paralyzed with wonder if I'm coming at you with this.
And then there's another scene where it's like, yep, it's there. It's flopping about. I think it's maybe when they get to the train.
It is in the train. I have a very distinct image that just replays in my head of the train scene. And I could be exaggerating it, but it's hard to believe that I could exaggerate that. I do feel like it must be some sort of like evolutionary advancement where it's
we do get a little bit of an explanation for the different types of zombies. And
steroids?
Spike is talking to Eric.
Yeah.
They're walking after they've kind of evaded some danger.
Our lovable dickhead SWAT guy from Sweden whose boat capsized and he has no hope of getting back to the rest of society now. He's going to be stuck on this mainland forever.
Yeah. So he's talking about like what happened to them, why do they look like that? And Spike is explaining to him, in this world now we have different types of infected people. But one of the things that I appreciated about this film is that even though now we have these different evolved infected people, they are not just seen as infected or zombies. They are treated as people. Like Dr. Kelson still sees the humanity of these people. Like these were actually all people. Even the moment where Jodie Comer is embracing the pregnant zombie and she's helping the pregnant zombie give birth, that's another sort of moment of humanity. So I think that's an interesting part of this film where it's like 28 years after the infection and after the rage virus, and you're starting to see a shift in the way that people think about those that are infected with the virus.
Interesting that you bring up the pregnancy scene or the birth scene of the infected woman. There were a couple scenes in the movie that almost took me out of it. And when she goes on to the train to go help this infected woman give birth to her baby, that was a scene that almost took me out of it. And I was like, what is happening here? Yes, Jodie Comer's character is sick. Her nose keeps bleeding. She keeps forgetting who she is. And she keeps forgetting that her kid is her kid and not her dad, because she does call him dad a couple times. And so she goes onto the train and she sees this infected woman who is thrashing about trying to give birth to her baby. And she lashes out a couple times, but then Jodie Comer just very calmly goes over to the woman and puts her palms out almost to offer them as support. And the infected woman does eventually grab onto Jodie Comer's hands. Jodie Comer's character, Isla, helps her bear down and give birth to this baby. As the baby kind of pops out, Isla doesn't miss a beat. She goes and she grabs the head to support it and helps this baby birth. And she is able to tie off the umbilical cord, and she has Spike cut it. And Eric's like, what is going on? So at this moment, Eric is kind of like the audience voice of reason, like, what are you doing? We should not be here. So we have that POV, but we also have Isla and Spike helping this infected woman give birth to a live baby that does not appear to be infected.
The first viewing, I thought like, okay, how the hell is this infected person pregnant? It's been 28 years. Later, are the infected now like having sex and able to procreate? But then on the second viewing, I was looking more at this infected person and she looked freshly infected.
Yes.
So she's probably from another community, was probably already pregnant
too.
And probably became infected after becoming pregnant.
And I'm thinking she was probably outcast because she was infected. And she had some remnants of clothing on. She had like a long shawl or, I don't know, like a vest or something. She wasn't completely nude. So I did think the same thing. I was like, how is she pregnant? But then I did think, okay, there are other communities on this mainland that we have not yet met. She was probably one of them and then was cast out.
This is maybe something that I'm just drawn to in films when things are sort of hinted at but not over-explained.
Exactly.
So there's still like some mystery there that you can decide for yourself as a viewer. And sometimes when it's so far-fetched, you kind of dismiss it and it, like you said, it takes you out of the film. But for me, I just kind of let it be, especially like as we get to the ending scene, you really have to kind of let that one be. During the whole movie, like, okay, like how did the infected people evolve? Why is there a pregnant infected? Like there's so many questions that are kind of building in your mind as you're watching this movie. It doesn't attempt to answer any of those. And I think that is a positive and not a negative of this movie because it allows for the mystery of this mainland to exist. Mm-hmm. As the audience member, you are paralleling to Spike's journey and that the mysteries that he's seeing are also mysteries to us.
Yeah, it's his coming of age journey. However, it's also our journey because we have not experienced this before.
Really, it just like made me excited. I'm like, okay, well, like what's to come? Like, what is he going to encounter?
What other mysteries behold? We do shortly after this pregnancy scene get one of the few deaths in this movie. And I didn't realize it until after reflecting on it that there are very few actual deaths in this movie.
Of characters
that we know.
That are established.
Our lead alpha does his signature move of grabbing people by the jaw or the mandible and ripping it upwards so that your entire vertebrae comes out with it out of the neck. And so you have like a whole like head on a vertebrae stick and he just like wields that around.
This is the way to up the ante on like how to make the infected people more frightening. Is like, not only are they going to bite you and tear you apart, they're going to rip your fucking head off.
Grab you by not the mandible, the maxilla, just rip you.
So technical.
But I just love that this alpha, he has a signature move. He doesn't kill people in a variety of ways, which makes sense. If you are a creature that has learned that something works, then you're going to keep doing that over and over again. So
Like it's fun for him.
It's fun for him to rip it out cleanly, kind of like when you eat crab and you rip open the claws and you get like a whole string of crab meat out. That's what it reminded me of. And then you dip it in the butter. Anyway, so this alpha character has learned that if I grab onto the maxilla of this head and I rip open and upwards, I'm going to get that nice, clean vertebrae coming out of the neck hole. And I can stick it onto a tree. I can carry it as a prop.
Kind of use it as a weapon too.
Yeah, like a ball and chain.
Yeah.
Kind of fun for him. So that's how our poor Eric, Swedish guy, dies. He is our comedic relief for a good portion of the movie. And then he dies.
He comes in to save Spike and his mom. Gives us, some nice levity.
Also, he gives us nuggets of the outside world. Society has kept on moving.
iPhones are still a thing.
They're still
so
alive
even
and
though
thriving.
they didn't exist at the time of the onset of the rage virus in 2002.
They were created eventually. So there's hope for the iPhone.
So just in case you're wondering, Steve Jobs was totally fine during the rage virus.
He was outside of the quarantine zone. So good for him. And other things kept on going too.
Like some of the modern trends that still exist, like, Botox injections and all of that sort of stuff.
Some body modification trends that exist now, they're still happening in this world as well.
Yeah.
Both times that we saw it in the theater, that got the biggest laugh.
Yeah. And honestly, for me, I think you were saying the pregnancy scene almost took you out of the film. That scene almost took me out of the film as well. The sort of like, hey, check out my ex-fiance.
Yeah.
And then Spike's like, why does she look so weird?
He's like, I know what's going on here. She ate shellfish. There's a girl on my island that eats shellfish and her lips blow up like that. And the audience did chuckle quite heartily.
Yeah, although it was a little bit of a funny moment, it did seem like a little bit of
like a body shame.
It seemed like a little bit of a jab just at modern society. So to me, that's like Alex Garland just inserting his own like kind of curmudgeon-y worldview.
Yeah. But then we have Isla say that, he's being a dick and she knows a dick when she sees one. Another quote that I think gets thrown out a lot on social media.
In regards to Mr. Alpha.
In regards to the alpha, not to Eric being a metaphorical dick.
As the movie progresses, it really becomes about Spike taking his mother to her final resting place.
Finally meeting Ray Fiennes, Dr. Kelson, who's covered in iodine because he says that's the best defense against the infection. So he's completely orange.
Yeah. And this is kind of like a nice moment. It's almost like there's 3 acts to the film. It's like you have the opening act of being introduced to the Islanders and that sort of like mission.
Almost like 4 acts.
4? Okay, yeah.
4 acts with Spike anyway.
Well, it's okay. So you have, what are you counting the opening act? The Jimmy?
No, well, Jimmy.
That's more of like an intro, like
that
a
was
prelude.
like an intro, yeah. So we have 4 acts with Spike. We have his coming of age, rite of passage, mission,
yeah.
And then we have his decision to grow up and become a man
and leave
and take care of his mom.
Yeah.
And then we have our Dr. Kelson.
That's sort of like his first big adult lesson, his big adult life lesson. It's like you have to learn about death and losing your mother.
And I feel like this is when we get Dr. Kelson offers the lesson of the movie where he says, Memento mori.
Memento mori.
Memento mori.
Oh, Ray Fiennes, you can really deliver some.
You can deliver some Latin. Yeah. So we learn that you must remember death and that death happens and remember the dead. And memento amoris, remember love and that you are loved.
Yeah.
It's very touching.
Did a tear sneak out?
Okay, only the second time that I saw it. I did not feel tears the first time I watched it. I think once I had relaxed into the world of the movie, that's when I became fully immersed and a little tear did sneak out during Isla's death scene, which after we watched it the second time, we went home and we watched 28 Days Later immediately. This scene where Ray Fiennes is saying memento mori and memento amoris, he says that there are different kinds of death and the best ones are the peaceful ones. And that's what he has to offer Isla, who has terminal cancer, because he used to be a doctor and he has deduced that she has cancer that either started in the brain and went to her body or vice versa. And so he's telling Isla and Spike that she's going to die from this cancer if the infected or some other way doesn't kill her first. And so he tells Spike that there are many kinds of death and the best ones are peaceful, and that's what he can offer. And that reminds me of when Jim first realizes that his parents are dead and Selena tells him, they died peacefully. You should be grateful. And Jim, of course, is like, I'm not grateful. But seeing 28 years later, it's like, oh, Selena was right. They died peacefully. That is something to be thankful for in this world of violent death.
Okay, there's a couple of things that reminds me of everything that you're taught and expect is not necessarily the way that it is. Because when we go to meet Dr. Kelson, we're expecting some sort of deranged, maniacal guy out there who's just making some bone towers. Then we meet him and he's sweet and he's soft.
And he's funny and he's a little
he's
awkward.
Compassionate.
He's socially awkward, of course, but he is funny and he makes little jokes when he's holding on to Eric's head, because they take Eric's head from the Alpha after Dr. Kelson saves them, and he's able to paralyze the Alpha momentarily. Doesn't kill him, even though he has every opportunity to kill him. Dr. Kelson's like, no, he's part of a community. I don't need to kill him. I'll let him be as he is. But he takes Eric's head and takes it back to his little habitat, and he's going to put his head through this process of boiling off all the skin and the ligaments and the tendons, process of placing his skull onto one of the towers. And so he holds on to this bare skull at Eric and says, alas, poor Eric, and looks at Spike like a little like, get it? Process of, I have no idea what you're talking about.
And I had no idea what he was talking about. But at least she got it.
I did. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well. And I was like, ha 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 ha.
You're laughing audibly in the theater and everyone's like
laughing unnaturally loud so everyone knows that I get it.
Like looking around like
anyone
yeah.
Anyone want to go on a Hamlet coffee date with me?
I'm just chomping on popcorn, just like, oh yeah.
Funny. Anyway, I do love Ray Fiennes' character and performance in this movie. He has such a beautiful, cute, nuanced character to offer us the movie's lesson.
I also feel like his character is telling the audience that this is like the main theme or how you should feel about the movie going forward. It's like things have changed. We talked about in our prediction episode that this was going to be a counselor heavy movie that's going to take place in a counselor office.
Yeah.
And the way to cure rage is through counseling. Little
did we know that Ray Fiennes' character is the counselor.
He's the counselor. So
we thought he needed the counseling, but he is the counselor.
Well, he's the one who's teaching us and Spike compassion, and he's the one who's teaching us about like the value of these lives, keeping their memory and holding the things that they were sacred.
And that not everything needs to be this terror-fueled thrill ride. And I feel like once we got his character, that's what made the causeway scene make sense for me. This scene that should have been terrifying, but had this whimsical, adventurous soundtrack behind it. I was like, okay, now that makes sense. All these scenes that should be terrifying, it's just the way of life. And it is all part of the journey and the adventure.
Even though the movie almost like knows like, hey, this isn't going to be this sort of like, you know, cities getting nuked and crazy hordes of zombies. Yeah. It's almost telling us to like, hey, like calm down.
Cool down on the cathartic rage.
Yeah. Let's take another look. Let's be kind. Let's be compassionate.
Let's see it from another lens or another viewpoint.
It did take up a lot of the third act of just this sort of spiritual journey.
It was a nice little chapter, our Dr. Kelson chapter, after Isla has passed and he's put her little skull on the very, very top of one of the towers. The baby, Spike, and Dr. Kelson Kelson are hiding from the Alpha Samson when Samson reached through and grabbed on to Dr. Kelson's skull or his teeth. I was like, oh no, he's doing his signature move. Dr. Kelson's gonna die. But he didn't because Spike was able to save him with a little sleeping dart. And then that's when Dr. Kelson's like, okay, it's time for you and the baby to go back to your island. You have to go home now.
In this fourth act, we're really just setting up the next movie. If you haven't seen the movie and you're watching on social media and you're wondering like, what's going on here? It's almost like going to turn into one of those spoilable things.
Yeah.
Because it's so bizarre and so outrageous. I think a lot of people probably hated the moment, but we should talk about just the ending now.
The ending. Spike drops off the baby, names it after his mom, calls it Baby Isla.
How sweet.
Yeah. Writes his dad a note like, don't come for me. Basically, I need to go find my own way.
I was wondering the whole time. I was like, why isn't dad trying to find his kid?
They do establish that the society has very strict rules that no one can go off to find anyone. There are no rescue missions allowed.
So he has to wait for the next planned mission.
So Spike is seen cooking up a nice big fish, and we get that East Hastings song from the beginning of 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
That was like a nice way to end the movie. So we didn't get the John Murphy song, but we did get the East Hastings song from Godspeed You Black Emperor. So we get East Hastings at the end of the film. We get the heightened, nerve-wracking, infected chase scene. Spike comes to a wall. He has no choice but to fight, and he slings a bunch of arrows and he kills some. And then we meet Jimmy. Grown up Jimmy, played by Jack O'Connell, who we just saw in Sinners as Remick, and he looks fun.
This is just like when everything was just like, what the fuck is going on here?
He's wearing a cool tracksuit. He has long blonde hair, a tiara, and lots of jewels.
He almost has more rings than you wear.
He has more rings than I am wearing.
Aleece wears a lot of rings.
I love rings. But you know who likes them more? Jimmy does.
And Jimmy has a whole Power Rangers team. And this is probably, if you see this meme on the internet, this is what you're going to see a lot of. It's going to be a lot of like Team Power Ranger, Team Jimmy, and they all have different weapons. They're almost like Ninja Turtles or ninjas or something like that.
They're like Spice Girls meets Power Rangers meets ninjas. They're all feral. They're all blonde. I think they're all wearing blonde wigs to match Jimmy's hair.
Highly skilled. They can do flips. They can do parkour.
They're parkouring everywhere.
The music shifts to like a metal
Some like
soundtrack,
metal
and then
punk
they're
song.
and then they're just like bashing the infected. They're just toying with them and they're having fun.
They're
like,
having a whale of a
sawing
time.
heads off and
not respectful at all.
So-
not the way of Dr. Kelson for sure.
Oh man, that ending just kind of, if you were wondering what the mysteries of the mainland held, then
Jimmy's part of that mystery.
This is part of it. So where's this going to go?
Bunch of feral blonde wigged kids just wreaking havoc. I do love when Jack O'Connell shows up. He has such a presence that feels frightening but fun.
He does. He really has had a big year for horror movies.
Yeah.
His performance in Sinners.
I hadn't seen him since he was a kid in Eden Lake, and he was terrifying in that movie. But in Sinners, he was again very terrifying but captivating. I just wanted to watch him when he was on screen. And same in this, when he showed up, he's like, seems like he needs some help, and the infected are coming. He's telling his team to hold. And then when it's ready, he's like, I'll fucking go. And it's so
and he doesn't
cool.
do anything.
He doesn't do he does do a couple like little leaps on his pole.
Yeah, at the end. He just lets his crew handle the mess.
Kind of like the Alpha on the hill when Jamie and Spike are hiding in that house. The Alpha on that hill lets his team go first. So Jimmy is the Alpha of his team.
Technically, Jimmy's pole is a lot longer.
Interesting. His actual pole, not anatomical pole. We just have come across some parallels to Jimmy and the Alphas.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, that was 28 Days Later. It just left us on a cliffhanger as we probably...
most fun, weird, bizarre cliffhanger that could be probably polarizing.
There are going to be a lot of elements to this movie that are polarizing. I just think that if you're expecting sort of a progression of chaos and action from 28 Days... And after rewatching 28 Days Later, weren't that many scenes of zombie hordes. A lot of it is human drama.
Yeah. And I did feel like 28 Days Later felt like a chosen family journey, the journey that a family might take and encounter different things along the way and different trials and tribulations.
Yeah, and then 28 Weeks feels more of like an action film.
Oh, it's
because
so
it's sort of like
action-fueled.
a war drama. It's basically like a extraction
It's brutal.
narrative.
It is
super
the most brutal
yeah.
of all the three. I think if you are wanting something like 28 Weeks Later, then you're going to be less likely to like 28 Years Later.
One of my main takeaways is that there's this sort of mystery. So it's like whatever you think, whatever your expectation of the mainland and of the remaining survivors, it's actually going to be a lot different and a lot more strange and bizarre. People have evolved just as the infected have evolved.
Infected have evolved. And I feel like overall, after having watched and reflected on the movie, I appreciate Danny Boyle and Alex Garland's decision to not make this zombie or infected or post-apocalyptic type movie so grim. They went in the opposite direction. They still have a lot of grim scenes and subject matter, but with the choice to make it more wondrous and mysterious and hopeful.
Other themes that we can maybe take away from this film, you definitely have like the idea of isolation. Do you have a village that is isolated even from the quarantined area that is isolated from the world? So it's like you have like different layers of isolation in this sort of way that we would expect in any sort of post-apocalyptic zombie universe, where they almost go back to like a feudal or like pre-technology society where it's like everybody has roles.
However, one of the roles is not a doctor. And I found that interesting that in this small society, Jamie the dad says, we haven't had a doctor for years. And at first I was thinking, oh, wow, no one could step up and be like a little pseudo doctor. But then I thought that must be a very purposeful choice on the community's behalf to not have a doctor in this community. I think it's because they have limited supplies, they have limited resources, they don't have enough to spread it to those who are ailing or unable to contribute.
So it's like if your time has come and you happen to catch cancer or some other disease, then it's like your time has come.
Your time has come. I did think that was a very interesting choice on the society's part to not have a doctor on purpose.
I think that's maybe a reflection of how society or how these civilizations have changed in their mindset of just what they value in their world. We're going to start to see a clash of the different mindsets. You know, are you going to be the type of person that is holding on to the past, someone who still has a framed photo of the queen and they're holding on to like, this is the way it was, let's go back to like the simple times where we had to churn our own butter? Or are you going to be like a Jimmy and say like, you know what, there's no rules anymore, I can do whatever the fuck I want,
get a bunch of jewelry and a tiara?
Or are you just going to revert to being just a straight up feral infected person with alpha working out, giant dong hanging around?
Or are you just going to accept everything and every creature for what they are and live your own life as best you can?
So a lot of different choices.
Which of those societies would you most likely want to be in?
Oh, 100%. I'm going to be a Jimmy.
A Jimmy.
How could you not?
I want to be with Dr. Kelson.
A Dr. Kelson?
It seems very peaceful and stress-free and kind of like, you know, whatever happens, happens. And also, if I'm about to die in a really horrific way, he can give me a nice little sleepy time dart.
Yeah, that's true. And you are a little bit of an introvert too.
I am an introvert. I would not mind hanging out with a bunch of bones.
You also don't like taking orders from so like...
Ugh, I would be so annoyed at the Jimmy, the main Jimmy. I'd be like, you know what? I want things too.
Hold. You're like, you know what? No, I'm going to go. I'm just going to do my thing.
I'm just going to go.
Like, don't tell me to hold.
Don't tell me to hold. I'll do it when I want to, Jimmy. I also don't want my name to be Jimmy also. I noticed in the credits, they're all named Jimmy. There's like Jimmy, Jemima.
Jamina, yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy, Jamina.
Wasn't one named like Jimmy Shit?
Jimmy Shit? I don't want to be Jimmy Shit. So I'm going to go hang out with Dr. Kelson.
Okay, Dr. Kelson. Okay.
Yeah,
so I'll be hanging out with the Jimmies.
You'll be in the Jimmies. I'll be with Dr. Kelson.
Yeah,
I'm going to be orange.
Going over some of our predictions. If you haven't seen our predictions for 28 Days Later based off of the trailer,
check out the June pre-guts.
We had a lot of wild predictions.
We did. I probably had one good prediction, and it was that Jodie Comer's character would find a baby and not necessarily have a baby.
Okay, so yeah, I think that I had predicted that she would have the baby, and the baby was a reason for her and Spike to leave the island and go off to find
formula.
Find something. Yeah, because I thought that was like, okay, that's going to be the narrative motivator for them to leave.
Yeah, and I did think that she's going to find this baby and be presented with this choice of leave the baby there because it's dangerous to have a crying baby in this world, or try to save this baby.
Yeah, and she tries to save the baby.
She tries to save the
so,
baby.
Yeah, so that was a pretty good prediction.
Much to Eric's chagrin, he's like, what are you doing? Put the baby down. I'm going to shoot it. And she's like, no, it's a baby.
And then I think I mentioned that like people's mindset will change because they've been out on their own for a long time and they're going to go crazy.
Sense. Natural progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were some of our better predictions. How about some of our more creative predictions? Also known as horrible predictions.
Well, we had, I think this was a joke prediction because I mentioned how it seemed like that there were counselors in the little island community, and Tony thought that maybe people are counseling people with rage, which
well, they are. That's Dr. Carson.
Well, Dr. Kelson, he does kind of counsel people with rage by shooting them with little sleepy time darts.
Yeah.
I had a wild prediction that
Dr. Kelson is excommunicated from the main island.
Oh, yeah.
That could still be true. I don't know if that's a creative prediction. That actually could be a good prediction.
So I guess maybe I have a prediction for one of the upcoming movies that perhaps Spike's dad, Jamie, knows Dr. Kelson more than he's letting on, because when he's talking about Dr. Kelson, he does mention that Dr. Kelson once waved at him while he was standing amongst a bunch of dead bodies.
Hi.
And Jamie's like, and then you know what we did? We ran away.
And the story seemed like kind of bullshit up.
It seemed like it wasn't the whole truth. I feel like Jamie must have known Dr. Kelson more than he's letting on. Maybe Dr. Kelson cast Jamie out and Jamie was pissed. Maybe they are related somehow.
Yes, there's definitely more to it than what
we're presented with. I feel like we'll find out more in one of the later movies. And then the internet's prediction that the emaciated zombie that pops up in the field of weeds and flowers is killing Murphy. It's not, that we know of.
Wait, how can you confirm or deny that?
There's no way to confirm or deny it. I just feel like they wouldn't be like, this is Jim from 28 Days Later.
Wouldn't that be awful?
That would be an awful ending to Jim. I'd be so mad. Someone say, no, that's not him.
Like someone in passing mentions like, oh,
there's Jim.
Like, I think that guy's name was Jim.
Yeah.
Next scene.
He and Selena had a thing. Yeah. I'm hoping that's not it.
Definitely not it.
Not it.
There's just a striking resemblance to Cillian Murphy. Aleece, I have a question for you. Was 28 Years Later built up too much?
It possibly could have been built up too much, but I think that was inevitable. I think with a movie that is so highly revered, any sequel is going to be built up too much. Same thing with The Exorcist. Like, that was built up way too much, and then everyone hated it. So I was trying to not let it be built up too much for me. Upon the first viewing, perhaps it was built up too much and I wasn't completely sold on it until I saw it the second time around.
I was forcibly telling myself to not build it up too much. So I think I was okay with just letting it be whatever it happened to be and just hoping that it wasn't awful, like Exorcist Believer.
Yeah. Would you say that you like it as much as 28 Days Later?
Okay, so I have thought about that quite a bit. Right after seeing 28 Years Later twice, we immediately went home and watched 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. I don't think that you can really top the original. It's a movie that is one of our favorite horror movies of all time. Probably one of my favorite movies of all time in any genre. The zombie genre is like my favorite genre. Well, when it's done well, not the really bad ones. Watching it again, it still holds up to this day. Like everything about the cinematography, the score, the acting, the story, everything. I love that. I love that movie to death. This movie, I wouldn't say it surpassed 28 Days Later. I would still probably choose to watch 28 Days Later, but I think it did a damn good job of giving us a more expanded view of the world and bringing us back to this world.
Yeah, it's a nice addition to that world.
I think I can probably say that I liked it more than 28 Weeks Later.
I like 28 Weeks Later as a different world, as a different movie. If I'm going to watch two of these back to back, I'm going to watch 28 Days and then 28 Years. I'm going to watch 28 Weeks Later on its own at a different time.
Yeah, you're right. 28 Weeks Later almost seems like it's doing something totally different. It wasn't written by Alex Garland or directed by Danny Boyle, so they had nothing to do with that
It was
movie.
executive produced by them, but yeah, they were not the writer or director of that movie. It was still a well-made movie, but it does feel like a different world.
Totally, yeah. The tagline for 28 Years Later, time didn't heal anything. What are your thoughts on this tagline?
I disagree with that tagline. I feel like whoever made the poster didn't really watch this movie because time didn't heal anything. I feel like offers a more dystopian viewpoint of this world. And I don't think that's what the movie gave us. It's just different. And for Ray Fiennes' character, he seems like a very healed person. He seems very at peace with the world. He doesn't seem like, oh man, wish I can get somewhere else. He remembers death. He remembers the love, and he's good with the world the way it is. He's good with what he's been handed.
Yeah. If anything, it should say like time makes people adapt and maybe act a little strange, but don't worry, strange is not necessarily bad.
That's very long.
And then they can just like, you can fill in your own.
Counselors available upon request.
Yeah, that's a good tagline. We know that the next film, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, has already been shot and is in post-production. They shot it back to back, and this one is going to be directed by Nia DaCosta, who did Candyman, the Candyman reboot.
The Candyman remake.
So what are your thoughts on the second installment for 28 Years Later?
I am glad there's going to be another one. At first, before watching 28 Years Later, I was like, oh man, I have to wait now. We only have to wait 6 months. It wasn't directed by Danny Boyle. It's directed by Nia DaCosta, who did a great job on the Candyman reboot. I am going to predict, though, that we might not get a look into the Jimmies. I feel like we're not going to pick up where we left off. I kind of feel like this next one's going to be more of a prequel to show us how Jamie and Isla came to be a couple and how they perhaps came to help form this community.
Okay, so you're wanting to see a bit of a like slight step back.
I want
like they're just like, you know what? This is called 28 Years Later, but we're going to go 28 months before. So we do get our months.
Ooh, we get months finally.
28 months before.
And then at the end of that movie, it'll say 28 months later.
That's what they should have called it. 28 Years Later, 28 months earlier.
28 months earlier is this next one. But it's called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Bone Temple makes me think of Ray Fiennes' character. So maybe we'll get a look at how Jamie and Dr. Kelson perhaps met. Maybe how Jamie and Isla met. Maybe how much of a badass Isla might have been before she got cancer.
What if it had some flashback scenes so that we did see some more Jodie Comer? But this is really about Dr. Kelson, his philosophy pitted against the Jimmy's philosophy, where they're more like nihilists. They are like, the world is ours. We can do anything we want.
Whereas Dr. Kelson's more peaceful and he's trying to live and let live. But I'm really interested in seeing Jodie Comer before she had cancer, because we get one brief glimpse of her being a badass, and that's when she and Spike are sleeping in that tower at night, and Spike's trying to be a good son and a good growing man and take first watch while his mom sleeps. But then one of those slow creeping, crawling infected people are coming at him, and they see his little shoelace that looks like a worm. The infected tries to eat his shoelace and is mad because it's not a worm, and he's about to bite Spike. But then boom, Jodie Comer puts a jacket over its face and slams it really aggressively against the, sarcophagus, against a tomb, and bludgeons it to death. And then, of course, she forgets the next morning what she had done. And Spike's like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know.
So will we see more Jodie Comer is the question. Will it be a prequel? I feel like if it was a prequel, that would definitely let down a lot of fans.
Why?
I don't know. It's because it's like people want to see the story progress.
They want to see the Jimmies.
They totally want to see the Jimmies. You can't just give the audience the Jimmies and then make them wait.
We're going to see some Jimmies. I think this next one, we're going to see Isla be a badass, which I think people would like to see. And we're going to see Dr. Kelson form his little bone temple. And we're going to see maybe how he and the Jimmies butt heads or are not of the same way of thinking.
Yeah.
And then by the third one, it's going to be full on Jimmy chaos.
And then Paris gets nuked.
Then, yeah.
That's my prediction.
Some nukes happen.
I can't wait for my prediction for the third one where I can say that everything gets nuked.
So everything that Dr. Kelson established and tried to impart upon us is just gone,
erased.
annihilated.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. That's great writing right there.
Great writing.
I think we should give this movie some awards.
Give it some awards.
Yes. What in 28 years later gets your Axe Award? The Axe is for one thing that you would remove from the movie. It could be anything.
Anything.
The tagline.
One thing that I would get rid of from this movie is in the opening, I would get rid of young Jimmy's dialogue and interaction with the maniacal priest.
Okay.
It felt unlikely and inconsistent with the rest of the movie and also a bit melodramatic. Get rid of the concept that that's his dad. Maybe get rid of some of that dialogue that young Jimmy has when Jimmy's hiding in that little crawl space and saying, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" That just seems so over the top. I know they're trying to be like Father and Heavenly Father, but it just felt so forced. And it really put me in like a defensive position for the rest of the movie until I had time to see the rest of the movie and sink into it. So I feel like if I'm at that point in the opening of the movie, then there's something wrong with it. And I pinpointed it to the dialogue that he had with the priest.
Yeah.
How about you?
First of all, it was really tough for me to think of anything to give the Axe. And I really like your Axe. Actually, I think I agree with that. I had thought maybe the scene where Eric was showing his ex-fiance to Spike.
That got such a big laugh in the audience.
I know. And I was just like, no, I'm going to leave that. I really should have picked that. And now that I'm about to say what my Axe Award goes to, I'm like slightly embarrassed and also like a little bit, I feel like maybe a little bit of a prude, but I'm giving the Axe to the Alpha Dong. But not entirely. We're not fully castrating.
Just half of his dong.
Just like scale back a couple inches, just to make it a little less distracting.
It's an evolutionary advancement. Okay,
because,
he's evolved.
Okay, and this is why I'm like slightly feeling a little bit prudish because for one, I shouldn't be...
Such a big part of the movie.
I was wondering how many of these like penis puns
can we make?
Yeah. I didn't feel clever enough to
Top dong.
put any in there. It was just a little bit too much and it was a little bit of a distraction. So I kind of actually like that it's so weird and it's so prominent. And I like
Very
the fact
prominent.
that it's like this recent trend of horror movies to just give every
Show the peni.
male audience member just like penis envy.
Free the penis.
We're just like, come on. Now this is just an inaccurate representation.
Inaccurate. I'm mad.
I just watched Boogie Nights and then followed by Nosferatu.
Well, we also just watched 28 Days Later that did have a dong, but not to that proportion.
Yeah, it was a little more anatomically
accurate and aerial viewed. More of like a master shot. Not up close. Not over the shoulder.
Yeah, so I'm just going to like trim it a little bit. So I'm going to just hack it down.
Hack it down.
I'm going to go get my chainsaw.
Don't hack his penis. Don't axe his penis off.
Just the tip.
Oh.
I can't believe
I'm going to
said
veto
that.
your axe.
Oh, God. I immediately regret my Axe Award. And I know that it's going to...
That's a hot take.
Yeah, it's a hot take.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for doing
Well,
that.
I'm giving my first aid kit to that penis that Tony just hacked off.
I gave my first aid kit to the penis, too.
What?
No, just kidding. Total lie. Every single one of my awards goes to that dong.
That dong. Golden gut, the dong.
Yeah. I'm going to start marketing like infected male enhancement. So you will get this giant member, but at the same time, you're going to become infected with the rage virus. I think a lot of guys would go for that.
Catch 22. What do?
I think they're going to take the pill.
Infected but giant dong. Interesting.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Enough about that.
Let's move
Yeah,
on.
let's move on. Yeah.
First aid kit. Tony, what character who died in the film, we didn't get many, would you bring back?
Okay. Well, another really hard award to give out because for one, like you're saying, not that many characters died. We had these sort of like military dudes who died, but you don't meet any of them, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, you could also include some of the infected. They died.
I know this doesn't serve the story, but I gave it to Isla. You know, she's just a cool character, and I want to see a little more Jodie Comer. So,
I know.
And if we don't get that in a prequel version, like what you were predicting, then in my movie, I'm going to bring her back. Dr. Kelson is going to come out with the skull and then say to Spike, here's your mom's skull head.
Tricked ya.
Just kidding. And she walks out from another one of the bone.
That would be the meanest
sculptures.
trick.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that is really
That's
mean.
a really mean trick, Dr. Kelson.
See, I feel bad about all of these awards. Can I just axe my award list, like all of them?
Nope, I'm keeping it. My first aid kit goes to Eric. I did
Because who else died?
Who
Nobody.
else died? I didn't want to give it to any of the infected. They probably should have died. They had their time. And so really it was between the unknown SWAT members, Eric or Jodie Comer. I do feel like Isla dying, aka Jodie Comer, it did serve the story, and it's going to help Spike figure out who he is when he has to be on his own. And it also provided him with a very valuable lesson of life and death and love. So I did not give my first aid kit to Isla. I gave it to Eric because I thought, you know what? He was a bit of a dick, but he did ultimately save them. And he just didn't want to be around a crying baby. Could you really fault him? So in my version, he lives, but then runs off to live with the Jimmies. He's already blonde.
He becomes a Jimmy.
He becomes Jimmy Eric. Yeah.
I love that. I love that award. Okay, Aleece, what gets your second kidney award? That award goes to any character living or dead that would get a sequel, prequel, spinoff, or something of that nature.
And you kind of already know, but my second kidney goes to Isla. I really want a prequel of her being a badass pre-cancer.
Nice. Yes, I would definitely like to see Isla in a spinoff, and it's just like her fighting off infected.
Rage fighting and bashing some zombie heads into more tombstones. I love that moment, and I wanted more of it. I wanted more moments of Isla as her old self and with the skills that we know that she must have had. Jamie and Isla must have been like a power couple fighting off the infected.
Yeah, and you were even saying you thought that in that tapestry that was in the village, there were faces of important people in that community, and one was
I feel like we saw a face.
Jamie, and one was Isla.
Yeah, I feel like we saw their faces in that tapestry of like, maybe that tapestry was like how their society formed and became successful, and they were part of that war on the infected.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of wondering if some of these things are either just alluded at and you can kind of speculate as an audience member, or if some of them are being set up for further installments of the movie.
Yeah, like those scary angular masks that some were wearing at the celebration for Spike when he got home from his coming of age adventure. That scary mask of the bleeding eye
almost
holes.
looked like a purge mask.
Yeah, like a purge angular bleeding eye hole mask. And I feel like, did Isla wear one of those masks when she was fighting off the infected? Were these masks that they wore to like kind of trick the infected into thinking that they're part of the infected?
Okay, so yeah, maybe a prequel is in order for the next installment. Maybe I'm getting on board with your prequel idea.
I'm on board with the prequel. And then a third installment of just Jimmy Chaos, directed by Danny Boyle.
The third movie is called Jimmy, 28 Jimmys Later.
It would be a great if like Danny Boyle went like full bonkers, train spotting, crazy cuts and edits and spunky Jimmys everywhere.
Just a bunch of Jimmys swimming through dirty toilets. Okay, my second kidney. Also, once again, I'm very embarrassed to just even mention what this is, but I thought it was a good one. Okay, this is my second kidney award. Goes to Samson, none other than the
dong alpha.
The alpha infected with the dong.
Top
and
dong
in
alpha.
his spin-off movie, it's going to be called AVN.
Alien
Alpha versus Nosferatu.
Oh.
So it's and then the subtitle is War of the Dongs.
A Tale of Two Dongs.
Yeah. So we get Nosferatu. He goes to London in the book. So he's going to be like, let's check out London again. I had a good time before.
Mm-hmm.
And he cruises over there. He's like, oh, not much is going on. Maybe there was like, a virus or something here. And then all of a sudden the alpha pops out, and then they have like a sword battle, but they don't use swords. If you
They
know
don't
what I
use
mean.
swords. This seems kind of like a late night Tubi special,
or just
or movie,
or just
Fubo.
straight up. Yeah, this could be just pornography. I'm sure there's already been like a porn parody of like this exact scenario that I have. Okay, moving on, moving along. I promise you, I do not have any more dongs in my award.
Aw.
Aleece, what gets your best intestine award? That is for the best, most gut wrenching, or just like your favorite kill.
I was going to give it to Isla because it was very moving, but I gave it to actually the actual kill. So that unnamed Swedish SWAT guy that had his maxilla ripped off and whole vertebrae coming out of his neck hole by the top dong alpha. That was cool to see the alpha do that kill and see him do his signature move right in front of poor Eric.
That's exactly what I gave my best intestine award to.
Nice.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you're going to give it to actual Eric, but we didn't actually get to see it happen.
Yeah, we didn't actually see it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, we just saw the aftermath. But
Right.
the unnamed Swedish SWAT guy, oof, that was brutal.
Your Silver Spleen award. What is your second most favoritist?
Most favoritist thing.
Secondly.
Thingy. My silver spleen goes to the whole finale, starting with the onset of East Hastings playing and Spike out on his own, grilling some fish, and then the infected come after him. One of them eats his fish, and Spike takes down a couple by himself, and then we get the Jimmies. So from East Hastings to the end of the Jimmy performance, that's my silver spleen.
Yeah, that's a great Silver Spleen. I really enjoyed that moment in the movie as
Yeah.
well. For my Silver Spleen, I was like, oh, I should give it to Ralph Fiennes. He like had a brilliant performance.
Oh,
I should
he's
give it
so
to Alfie
good.
Williams. He had such a good performance.
So good.
Jodie Comer, she's
So
always awesome.
good.
And so I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to give it to the entire cast.
The ensemble.
I'm the ensemble.
I
yeah.
like that.
I thought that the performances were very strong just in overall. I mean,
Yeah.
even Eric, who provided a short but memorable
Yeah.
little scene.
Comedic douchebag. He was so great.
Yeah. And so I just think that everyone did a fantastic job.
And
Little Alfie Williams.
Aaron Taylor Johnson is this badass dad. That's
I usually
like,
don't like him in movies that much.
I liked him a lot in Bullet Train, but I haven't really liked him in other things. But that could be like a reflection on the movie more so than on him. But I agree, he did a great job in this.
Yeah. And I think Ralph Fiennes is also just insanely good at everything he's in.
With like every tiny little bit of dialogue, you can just see his subtext and cogs working. He's just so warm, vulnerable, comfort.
A tenderness.
He's very tender. I just want him to cradle me in like a little baby cocoon.
So yes, I gave my Silver Spleen to the entire cast.
I like that. That's very good. Because I was thinking of like individual performances and like, I can't do it. I can't pick one performance.
Yeah, we've made it to our golden gut, our coveted golden gut
Covered a
award.
golden gut.
Aleece, what is getting your golden gut for 28 years later?
I'm giving my golden gut to every.
Jimmy.
I already gave my silver spleen to the Jimmies.
Oh.
They can't have two. My golden gut goes to every scene that had a song from Young Fathers. So basically it's going to
That's the entire
score.
movie.
It's going to the score.
To the score,
from
okay.
Young Fathers, which I mean is like a huge nod to like Danny Boyle and the editing. Every time I listen to the soundtrack, I think of the scenes that were attached to the score. So I have to give it to the score.
Yeah, it's you can listen to the soundtrack and remember the scenes. Like,
Yeah.
it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
A great successor to John Murphy. So
yeah. I think those were tall boots to fill.
they were, yeah.
I think Young Fathers has carved a little piece in this 28 years and days universe.
Yeah, and their rendition of Boots, as you
Yes,
just mentioned, I think that's what you
One-
were alluding to.
Mhm.
Yeah, was even more chilling than in the trailer.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly agree with your decision there.
What is your golden gut going to?
My golden gut goes to Danny Boyle and Alex Garland.
Yeah.
Bravo. That's what I wrote in here. And just like giving us this really great sequel to a movie that we've been waiting for this for a really long time. There's been a little bit of divisiveness,
Mhm.
at least in the social media world with this film. You know, everyone can have their own take on it.
And
but
I think it makes a lot of sense if you have like two camps of people that love 28 Days Later versus people who have just seen 28 Weeks Later, or people who really loved where 28 weeks later went after 28 days later.
Yeah.
So if you're able to kind of compartmentalize and put 28 weeks in a different world, then I think those people are more likely to enjoy 28 years.
Yeah. And I just think that everything that they brought us was done with such love, I guess, for the first film, done so skillfully, just like in terms of the cinematography, the fact that this movie looks really good. And a lot of it was shot on iPhones.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Danny Boyle called it a poor man's bullet time camera rig. So it's like taking inspiration from The Matrix.
It's like, it's unfathomable to me as it's like a lay person who doesn't understand cinematography, seeing it and seeing stills of production. I'm just like, whoa, how did he think of this?
He didn't just use iPhones.
He did
because
everything with a
wanted
purpose.
It was all done with a purpose. So it's like he wanted to find a location that looked like it had been untouched by humans and for decades. They found a location and they needed to have lightweight cameras and crew in order to achieve the shots they wanted so that it didn't look like it had been like trampled by
a bunch of elephants. Yeah.
And also so that they didn't have to do a bunch of CGI. They're sort of like just problem solving with the movie, and that mixed with like a really good soundtrack, a really good cast of actors. There are definitely like some things that are not super believable in this like fantastic world.
Yeah, and some odd moments that kind of bring you out of it, but overall very intentional and magical.
I'm curious about this mysterious post-rage virus world and
that's different from other post-apocalyptic zombie type movies that we've seen. One thing that we didn't go over was what it reminds us of. And I've just thought of something. There's another movie. It's called Zom 100. It's I believe it's a Japanese film, and it's like a horror comedy. But the whole message of that movie is, would you rather eat a steak or would you rather die being torn apart by zombies, never having eaten that steak? And so it's like, live in the moment and take life's gifts, even if you are in a zombie apocalypse. So it's a silly movie, but it's very positive. And I think in a way, this is the most positive zombie type movie I can think of in comparison to that one.
So Zom 100.
Zom 100. It's cute. And I don't know if you'll like it, but it's worth giving a shot. If nothing else, for a comparable message or theme to 28 years later.
Okay, Aleece, we have to give 28 years later a Blockbuster rating. Is this a staff pick, a main shelf, a dollar rental, a bargain bin movie, or back alley dumpster movie?
I think it's fairly obvious that this movie, for me, it could be on several types of staff pick lists. It would definitely be on a staff pick for horror of 2025. It would live on my main shelf indefinitely, for sure. But for certain staff pick lists, it would be on there.
Yeah, for me as well. This is a staff pick. If you walk into the Blockbuster, it's going to be right there, dead center. Rent it.
Not like a specific kind of staff list, just like staff list all the time.
I need to give it a little bit of time to like let it simmer. But yeah, I think it'll probably be not on there forever, but it'll be on there
for at least 28 years.
There you go. For at least 28 days, it will be on my staff pick list.
Nice. And then Letterboxd rating. We actually did give this a Letterboxd rating. We gave it 4 stars. Again, with those ratings, we give things time before immediately giving them 4.5 or 5 stars.
Yeah.
But right now it's pretty high with 4 solid stars.
Yeah. And I was thinking like this could be a 4 or 5, but I have to give it a little bit
more time. So maybe in a year it will get 1 more half star. We'll see.
Check out our Letterboxd reviews. You can find us at Gutted Horror on Letterboxd.
Exactly.
Lesson learned from this movie. Aleece, was there something that you learned by watching 28 years later?
Obviously, I learned memento mori, memento amoris from our favorite doctor, Dr. Kelson. You?
I learned that the Frisbee is worth it. Okay.
The Frisbee is worth the trudge.
The trudge.
Onto the mainland.
And it's okay if you are...
Giant donged.
Giant. Yeah, I was trying to think of a way
Don't feel bad about your giant dong. It's okay. You have a place in the world of the infected. But just to reiterate, Memento Amoris.
Memento Amoris, Memento Adongus.
That's how we're ending the episode. Well, that's it, guys.
All right.
If you have seen 28 Years Later, which I'm assuming you have, if you've watched this far, what were some of your favorite moments? I'm assuming that you liked it if you watched this far, because you probably would have turned it off in disgust if you didn't. If you didn't like it, though, please tell us why. I'm really curious.
Feel free to give this movie some of the golden gut awards. Like, what gets your axe? What gets your golden gut?
What gets your golden gut for the movie?
Yeah.
What would you like to see in the subsequent films?
Let us know.
Do you want to see an Isla prequel where she's a badass bashing zombies?
Do you want to see AVN? Alpha versus Nosferatu?
Yeah, do you want to see that? Don't forget to leave us a comment, like, subscribe, give us a rating, please. It would really help us out.
Yes.
In life and with our confidence as podcasters.
Are you saying that you're going to quit unless they
I'm going to quit.
Subscribe?
I'm threatening everyone. Ultimatum. Just kidding. But no, it would help us out and make us feel really good about ourselves.
All right. Thank you for watching and or listening. This has been another episode of Got It.